Ladies and gentlemen, Marlo Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, isn't that inspiring to watch? Even that little bit. You know, I'm very excited to be here because I adore Lee. And I also love being at a gathering of dedicated artists, because I think that that's one of the things in life that really is nutritious, hearing from each other and learning about each other. And Lee, I'm so sorry that Phil couldn't be here tonight, but as I was leaving the house, he gave me a wonderful story. He told me about this Irish man who was on his deathbed, and got his best friend is sitting right with him. And he says to the best friend, "Mike, I want you to do something for me." And Mike says, "Patty, I'll do anything in the world for you. What is it?" Mike says, "In the cabinet, in the basement, is a 100-year-old bottle of whiskey. When I die, I just want you to pour it over my grave." And Mike says, "Don't you worry, Patty, but would you mind if I passed it through my kidneys first?" There's something about Irish guys. They only like to tell jokes about other Irish people. But anyway, I can't help it. You know, I'm a comedian's kid. I see a lot of people, I want to make you laugh. So that's it. But it's true. We do gather together to inspire each other. And over the years, I have met so many inspiring people. I've met brave kids facing deadly diseases whose strengths and spirits helped them survive. I've met a New Orleans family who lost everything in that brutal flood, but who had the deep resilience to rebuild their lives from the bottom up. And God knows I've met artists. I grew up in Hollywood, and I saw firsthand how the greatest artists fought with all their hearts to keep truth in their work. I've just rarely seen all of these qualities in one person until I met Lee Grant. And I met Lee in a way that can only be called the Lee way. It was after That Girl, I had taken 2 years off and gone to New York to study with Lee Strasberg to get rid of all the shortcuts I'd learned doing a lead in a television series and to get back to the work. And after an intense and humbling 2 years, I did a wonderful drama called The Lost Honor of Catherine Beck, which was a serious part, a serious role in a serious film. Then out of the blue, I got a call from Lee Grant, who by now had made her mark as a director. I knew of her, of course. Aside from her great work, my father had a crush on her forever, so I knew all about her. And the first thing she said to me was so shocking. She said, "I want to apologize to you." And I said, "For what?" And she said, "I underestimated you. I had written you off as a different kind of actress. And now I want to find something for you." This great artist had the generosity of heart and spirit to reach out to another actor and say she had noticed. It took my breath away. And a year later, she sent me a beautiful piece called Nobody's Child, which she would direct. But this gift for noticing is something that has shaped Lee's life. There was a quote I once read: "To be an artist is to never avert one's eyes." It's been those eyes that have made her a breathtaking actor and what's made her a killer documentarian. From her bracing film, Wilmar 8, which told the story of 8 female employees who had been overlooked, given unequal pay, no chance for promotion, and in 70 below zero, they picketed the bank that had treated them so poorly. To Down and Out in America, which took on Reaganomics by exposing the true picture of the devastating poverty in this country, for which she won the Oscar for Best Documentary in 1987. And this year's Battered, if you haven't seen it on YouTube, it's really, really heartbreaking. The Assault on Hillary Clinton, a YouTube short that chronicles the full frontal sexist bullying suffered by Hillary as the first female presidential candidate of a major American party. She's noticed bullying, all right. She had a front row seat to it. At 23 years old, Lee dazzled the theater world playing a desperate shoplifter in Detective Story. And then she won the film role as well and garnered her first Oscar nomination. She was a blazing, rapidly ascending star until the bully who had no shame entered her galaxy. And she landed on the blacklist for not testifying against her husband at the Hewitt hearings and for giving an impassioned eulogy for fellow actor J. Edward Bromberg, who was blacklisted and she believed died from a heart attack at 47 because of it. And then she was blacklisted, kept from working for 12 years. 12 years, from 24 to 36 years old, the prime years for a female actor. It's heartbreaking to think of it. And when she was finally exonerated, she had to start back at square one and instantly proved that her shining debut a dozen years earlier was not just beginner's luck. She did 71 episodes of Peyton Place and won her first Emmy. She appeared off-Broadway in The Maids and won her first Obie. She reconquered the big screen in Valley of the Dolls and Heat of the Night and Shampoo, the latter winning her first Oscar. It was during the making of Shampoo that Lee once again demonstrated her refusal to compromise the truth, no matter the cost to her. And Lee, I don't know if this is the truth or not, or just a Hollywood legend, but I'm going to tell this story because I just love it. She wanted to play one scene differently from the way Warren Beatty wanted to do it. She wanted to do it more realistically from a woman's perspective, but Beatty disagreed, and he refused to change the scene. So after giving it some thought for a few days, Lee went to the director, Hal Ashby, and she told him that she couldn't do the scene Beatty's way, and she was going to quit the movie. As she was walking out the door, Beatty nabbed her and asked her what was wrong. So she told him. And after a moment, Warren threw up his arms and he said, "All right, well, what do I know? Play it your way. I'm a man. What do I know?" And she did it. I mean, you know, come on, know how to fight. All these stories I wanted to tell and describe, this is all the puree of Lee Grant. And through it all, she has never, ever given up her sense of truth in her work, brave and strong and resilient and generous, an artist who has never averted her eyes. And through it all, she's kept her sense of humor. I remember when we were all marching for women's rights and standing up to the unfairness of inequality, she revealed to us that I'd been married to a communist and a fascist, and neither one of them took out the garbage. I just love that. When I think of Lee, I can't help but think of what Shakespeare wrote. Age cannot wither her beauty, because Lee's beauty comes from within. I remember watching the night you won your Emmy, Lee. The audience was so happy you were back where you belonged. And they went wild, giving you a long and loving ovation. And I'll never forget, you looked out at them with your eyes sparkling with truth and emotion, and you said, "It's mutual." I never forgot it. It was so touching. It's still mutual, Lee. What a pleasure it is for me to be here tonight to present you with this Legacy Award, because I know personally that you are the truest definition of legacy. You're an inspiration, you're a mentor, you're a dear friend, and I love you.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Well, of course, nothing less would do for you.
Wow.
Nothing less would do.
Thank you. Wow. Little Yorva Haskell Rosenthal is up here. But that Lee Grant, I want to tell you, she's something. I've gone to heaven. The work that she had to do on herself to transform into the actor that she became. First, the first thing that I saw her in after those That Girls, going into Catherine Becker, this television film that I didn't know. I had to, look to see who it. That couldn't be Marlo. That couldn't be Marlo Thomas. She had transformed herself as an artist. It was just so beautiful. And so we went on and made something really beautiful together. She was extraordinary in it. And it was about a woman who had appeared at Gloria Steinem's, one of Gloria Steinem's thing, a woman who had been through an asylum and had come out the other side. And Marlo went up to Boston and kept meeting with her and going to the asylum and doing her homework, and came up with this extraordinary piece of work. Boy, you did it, girl.
Woo!
That was one of the most extraordinary introductions I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And now we have to follow it. So here we go. Let's start somewhat close to the beginning. First of all, I want to tell you all, if you haven't read Lee's book, I Said Yes to Everything, what a title that is, you should. It's really, really wonderful. And one of the most touching sections of this is where you talk about 148th Street. Tell me about the significance of 148th Street.
Well, 148th Street, Riverside Drive, 706 River, was where I was raised. And I was raised in a kind of woman-led family. My mother and my Aunt Fremo had come over from Odessa, from Russia, as small girls, 11, 12. And so their only education was the movies, the black and white movies. And so they took on the airs of the black and white rich ladies in the films. And the rich ladies in that time spoke in voices up here.
Yes.
Only peasants spoke with a voice
Like
down
Margaret
here.
Dumont.
Yes, way up here. And so,
Oh, my goodness.
And so, exactly, you're my Aunt Fremo.
Yes, I am.
And so it was, and Aunt Fremo called me Lovey. And so my whole world was surrounded by young girls from Russia who were acting like movie stars in the 30s. And so they talked that way to each other, they talked that way to me, and as I found out when I went to the neighbor playhouse, that was my voice.
Wow.
When I went to speech class and they played, I had the same voice as they did. and they had to, teach me to lower my voice until it, came to where it was. But the three of us obviously were going around like this all the time on 148th Street.
Do you remember, was there a moment where you looked up at those black and white images and said, not only I want to do that, but I think I could do that?
What black and white images?
The movie screen, on the movie screen.
Never.
Never. You never thought that?
No, my mother wanted me to be a dancer, a ballet dancer, despite the fact that I had these fat little legs. She put me at the Metropolitan Ballet School at 4, and so from 4 till 9:30, 3 times a week, we'd get on the double-decker bus from 148th Street and the Riverside Drive and drive the hour down to the Metropolitan Opera House where the ballet lessons were. And it happened that she got me into the American Ballet, not because I could dance, but because she was very charming. And the other little girl who got in, who was a real dancer, Anne Marie Colorado was her name. She got tuberculosis of the hip.
Ooh.
And she was one of those superb children. She must have been 11 or 12. And my father heard about it, and he said, no more dance. Not that I would have ever been in her class anyway. But that was her first image. And the next image was Juilliard, where I still had the voice that was up here like that, and so that's how I sang. And then the neighborhood playhouse, which saved my life. It was the minute I entered the Playhouse and met Sandy Meisner, who was the great method teacher, and he told me I was a phony and that I didn't take time to understand or to learn. It was like I'd come home and met the man who would tell me what to do and how to do it. And it took a long time. I was 16 then, I was 16. And suddenly my life had a shape which never left.
You eventually found your way on to the screen in Detective Story with Kirk Douglas, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that experience.
Well, I had done it as a play on Broadway, and I left it to go into another play, which was written by my husband, Arnold Manoff, who was part of that. You remember the movie about the communists who were moving down to New York? Mm-hmm. Barbara, the singer Barbara. I have a problem with last names ever since I went in front of the committee.
Streisand.
Barbara Streisand. No, it's true. I could not introduce one friend to the other after the committee. The names went out of my head forever. But he was part of this group that came, that were successful, Ring Lardner, and the one who was played in the movie.
The Way We Were.
Trumbo. They were all, and so this communist wrote a play, and I was in it right after Detective Story.
Oh,
and
Was this Lo and Behold?
no,
No, that was later.
that was later. I can't remember the name of it.
Streisand.
But J. Edward Bromberg was in it. That's who we were talking about. And I had spoken to Bromberg. Bromberg was afraid. He was called up in front of the committee, and he had a bad heart, and we were standing in the wings about to go on stage, and he said, I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'm sick. They're calling me in front of the committee again. And he left and did a play in London. And it was like a month after he was there that he had a heart attack and died. And so they held a memorial for him at the Edison Hotel. And all of these people, great directors, Elia Kazan, who later gave names, was there to talk about Bromberg. And they said, well, we need somebody young. Would you talk about him? And so it was the first time I'd spoken in public, and I said, he told me that the committee had called him and that he was afraid he was going to die, and he did, of the heart attack. And 2 days later, I was on the blacklist for speaking at his memorial and couldn't work in film or television anymore.
Now I want to delve into that for just a second, because I have read books about the blacklist. I've seen documentaries about the blacklist, but you have some details in this book that illuminated the blacklist in a whole new way for me. Let me just preface this by saying I'm going through this. I want to make sure that I'm covering most of the major events. And I especially want to pay attention to when exactly you were blacklisted and how that happened. But what I had in my head was, from documentaries and dramatic films about this, is there's a long table and you're sitting at a table and there's a microphone and there's congressmen yelling at you and stuff.
That.
You did that,
Yeah.
but not at first. And I'll just read this little part of it here. Victor Navasky, who would later write Naming Names about the HUAC period, was there and recalls it as a memorable night. Speaker after speaker worked up the crowd until finally the man everyone was waiting for appeared, Clifford Odets, the playwright and screenwriter. His passion brought the crowd to the boiling point, just like his union organizer in Waiting for Lefty. Almost 2,000 people crowded into that room, cheered him. They would have followed him anywhere. A week after Clifford Odets spoke at Joe Bromberg's memorial, which you were talking about, he met with the committee and gave names. I went to a meeting at Actors Equity. Leon Janney was sitting in front of me. Well, you made the list, he said. What list? I was stunned by this, because it seems like a very passive-aggressive thing, in addition to being ugly, to do to another person. Just, oh, I'm on the list. You hear about it from another person.
Yeah,
That's how it happened.
that's how it happened.
What were the dynamics of that like? I mean, how does something like that? What is the process by which that happens? Is it simply something saying she's a communist and bam, you're on the list, or?
I don't think you needed to be a communist. In that time, there were people who made money from putting you on the blacklist, which then went to casting, CBS, ABC, NBC. And suddenly, you know, you weren't on the list the week before, but you are now on the list. And it's sent to the advertisers, because it's mainly the advertisers who are worried about their products not being bought. So after I talked, this grocer in Syracuse put a line above Colgate toothpaste which said, would you buy this product if it helped to sell Communist Lee Grant on the soap opera? And so the soap opera, the Colgate said, uh-oh, you know, our product is in danger, and so, you know, get rid of her. And it was all a part of money making for the blacklisting guys. They got Kim
Hunter?
Kim Hunter.
Yeah.
They got Kim Hunter, who had appeared at a lunch or a dinner that Eleanor Roosevelt was at, but it didn't make any difference. It was so amorphous what you could be blacklisted for, and it had nothing to do with the committee. The committee spawned this money-making scheme to blackmail them.
So they're in the employ of the networks, the advertising agencies, and so forth, who want to know who's a communist so they don't employ them and get in trouble with the government. But these folks you're talking about,
or who's a lefty.
Right.
You know, you don't need to be a communist.
Right. But they don't. They're not simply reporting. They are. It sounds like you're saying in some cases they would put you on the list and then report it and get their money.
It was called red channels.
Yeah.
Yes, red channels. Red channels, and if you went on the list in red channels, if you were scared enough and got in touch with the guy who made the money off it, was Victor what? I can't do the names. Do you remember the name? No. And it's in my book. Anyway, anyway, if you got in touch with him, like Kim did, and he said, you know, give me $200, and get up in front of the union and tell them how sorry you were for being there, which he shamed her, this wonderful, wonderful actress, putting her in front of the AFTRA to say, I'm so sorry that I went to this place, which, you know, it was just such a foul and terrible thing to do to people. And it had nothing to do with their being communists. The communists were taken care of by the House Un-American Activities Committee. Anybody who was leftish or signed something. You know, if you sign a petition that says, you know, stop it, you're out.
Right. So all of this time, you're on the blacklist. You can't get a job doing what you want. What did you do during that period?
Well, the most extraordinary thing about that period was that Actors' Equity, the stage union, never had a blacklist. AFTRA had the blacklist, SAG had the blacklist. AFTRA, the Television Academy union, had a board that would blacklist you from the dais. If somebody got up and spoke like that guy did, they'd say, write his name down. That's really the way it went. Write his name down and give it to the guy who does red channels, and he's blacklisted. That's the way it happened in the television union. And that's what happened in the Screen Actors Guild. The only one was Actors' Equity, who made a deal with the producers on Broadway that nobody should be blacklisted in the theater, and they weren't. And so that's how I earned a living those years. I went from play to play, you know, plays didn't last that long, and went to play, and I started teaching. I taught at Berghoff Hagen, and he had been a teacher of mine. And I went to him, and they were so empathetic. Empatico, simpatico.
Simpatico.
Yeah, simpatico.
Yes. And then, what brought you back? Would you say that it was Peyton Place?
Yes, it was Peyton Place. And it was, you know, such a scary trip to go from New York and being accustomed to being blacklisted, and suddenly I got a clearance from HUAC, and they said, okay, she can work again, because it had been 12 years. I'd been on the blacklist when I was like 24 to 36. I was 36 when I got off the blacklist. And so, so I got the offer of this job on Peyton Place, and it was, Peyton Place at that time was on 3 times a week. A new chapter 3 times a week. And it was the most popular show in America. So I went from such obscurity, you know, with such a hidden background, to suddenly, you know, playing this part on Peyton Place. What was her name? What was my name? Stella Chernak. Stella Chernak brought me back. I'm telling you, wow. And yeah, I couldn't get off the feeling, you know, that I was nominated for, I think I won
An
Emmy
Yeah.
that year. And I thought the FBI are going to be there, they're going to get me. You know, I was so, you know, creeped out. And Sinatra was there. He was going with Mia Farrow at the time. You remember? Sure. And he came over and he said, cool it. It was like he knew the whole story, and it was, you know, very moving for me. Well, I had it. I was crippled, you know. I was scared about my age, because I was, you know, 20-something when it started, and I was 36 when I did Stella Chernak, and the whole Hollywood thing of being young, you know, being in your 20s was, you know, such a big thing as far as employability was concerned, that I was scared to death they'd find out I was 36. And I hired a publicity guy, you know, to, you know, when they were congratulating people on birthdays, not to have it on the radio. I had a dinner with Mayor Yorty, and he took 5 years off my driver's license. But I was scared, you know, I really was, because I had to earn a living, you know, and I knew that the what do they call that date, expiration date? That, you know, that I had an expiration date as far as Hollywood was concerned, so I wanted to push it off as long as possible, because I had to make money. I had a daughter, and so it really wasn't until I wrote the book. It wasn't until I wrote the book that I stopped running. And I said, oh, okay, you know, that's all right, it's okay. I'm old, and it's perfectly fine, and I look good.
You do. You do.
Woo!
But then something fairly extraordinary happened, which is a variety of really interesting filmmakers started to cast you in their movies, playing very different kinds of roles. No two roles are the same. And two of my favorites I want to talk about, and any of the other ones that you want to bring up, jump in. But the two I wanted to ask you about first were by Hal Ashby, The Landlord and Shampoo. Can you talk a little bit about working on those films with Hal Ashby and playing those roles?
Hal and Norman Jewison. Hal had been Norman Jewison's editor. And we had made such friends in Heat of the Night because he was the one who was to pick out, the hair I should wear and the clothes I should wear in Heat of the Night. And we became really good friends. And so he showed me the script for, which is it?
Which one? The Landlord came first.
The Landlord.
Yeah.
The Landlord. And I said, I want to do that part. And he said, no, I've already got Jessica Tandy for it. And I said, just read me, just read me. I know these women. I know they're my mother, they're my aunt. I understand it, and I've got to do them. And so I found an old kind of yellow fur hat and put it to have that yellow that I had in the film. And I used their voices to do the part. And so I got it. And it was, I saw the film recently. It's just so delicious. And Pearl Bailey is so amazing in it. We had these scenes together, and Beau Bridges.
It's also of historic interest. I saw it, they re-released it a few years ago, and I saw it at, I think it was Film Forum, and there's a point where Beau Bridges' father chastises him for buying a brownstone in Park Slope. He says, that's a ghetto. And I think they use that voice you're talking about. That's a ghetto.
Well, I had that voice.
Yes.
Have any of you seen this film?
The Landlord. Round of applause for The Landlord. Yeah.
Round of applause for The Landlord. I mean, gosh, what an experience that was. I mean, to just live that through, and Hal Ashby's direction was usually surprise me. What kind of gift is that to an actor? Surprise me. What do you want me to do? Surprise me.
Shampoo was even bigger for you.
Yes.
Shampoo. Tell me a little bit about Shampoo, and particularly about Warren Beatty.
Warren, when I was doing a show on Broadway, a Neil Simon show that Mike Nichols directed, said, I have a movie for you. And so for about a year, he was writing it with another great screenwriter. And so we'd meet and have a reading of it. Goldie and Julie Christie, who he was going with at the time. And so they would use those readings to do further work on the script. And I don't know, you mean the stuff that I wrote in the book about
Yeah,
it?
well, just some stories about not everyone here has read it, but some of the stories about what it's like to work with this legend.
Well,
Warren
of course,
Beatty.
he was the hottest guy in the book. And of course, it was legendary. He wrote a scene in which I come home. It's always is around the beauty parlor where he is the hairdresser, and I am having an affair with him, and I'm in lust. I am so the character is so in lust with him. She's on fire. She's on fire. She's on fire, and so she has a date with him to meet her at her mansion, and she comes home with the scarf around her head and the rollers in her hair, and she looks for him, and she opens the door to her daughter's room. Daughter played by Carrie Fisher.
Sure, yeah.
Beautiful, under 20, sitting there on her bed, and there I see my hairdresser, Warren, standing behind her, kind of, pulling up his zipper. And this is the scene, and then he pulls me out of rehearsal and says, Lee, women don't really notice when they go into the room and they see they don't know. It happened with me. This girlfriend came in, there was somebody under the desk, they went right by. They don't notice. I said, is that a direction? That I should go in and see see my daughter with you and say to myself, nothing happened here? He said, yes, that's the way women are. And so I went home, I couldn't sleep, I had a migraine, and I decided I couldn't work with him. And I came to the set, and I went to Hal, who was directing Shampoo, and I said, I'm quitting. He didn't pay any attention. He went on with the directing. And I sat on the railing, the stairs, watching the work that's going on. And Warren came over, jumping up the set, what's the matter? What's wrong? I said, nothing's wrong. You can get yourself another Felicia. I'm out of it. Mm-hmm. He said, why? I said, you can't tell me how to act. You can't tell me what's going on in my head. You want to do that? If that's your way? I have a director. I have Al Ashby, who says, surprise me. Mm-hmm. You say, no, you don't know what's happening when you go in that room. He said, I take it back. It's fine. And of course, I open the door to the room, and I know what's happening. But Felicia is so starved for that act, for him, for that it doesn't make any difference who he's been to bed with. And so that's the story of that, scene you just saw.
It's a magnificent. That whole section is wonderful because it's like she's taking him back. It's like she's reclaiming him. She's reclaiming him.
No, she's not.
What do you think's going on in there?
She just wants to fuck.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
You guys don't get it.
Did Warren ever talk to you after that scene about his feelings about how things turned out?
No, we never ever talked about it again. Just whatever impulses fine.
Yeah.
Just it was fine.
Well, you won the Oscar.
Yes.
But then you take another turn, which is you start directing. And the next decade plus, really about a 2-decade stretch, is defined, really everything up to the present is more defined by the directing.
Yeah.
And there were two branches of this, and I want to talk about them individually. There's the documentaries, and there are the TV movies.
Yeah.
And there are, I get on a soapbox about this a lot, but people who don't know a lot about TV history think that television history, all the important stuff happened like after the turn of the millennium. Yeah. It's not true. There were some extraordinary television movies being made in the 70s, and particularly in the 80s, and you directed a number of them, including the one that starred Marlo Thomas, which she won an Emmy for. And you became the first woman to win a DGA award for directing a scripted feature.
Woo! Woo!
That meant so much to me, because it was directors giving me the award. It was the directors saying, "You're okay, kid," and it meant a lot to me.
So tell me about that move. How did that come about? what sort of a learning curve was there, and how difficult was it to just get in the position where you could direct?
Oh, it was, it was accidental. AFI called and said, we're starting a women's directing workshop, and do you know anybody who would be interested in it? And I said, oh, Diane Cannon, this might. And then I said, me, sure, I'd like to too. And so I directed a marvelous 20-minute film and transformed the AFI into this period piece with a horse coming up in a chariot and costumes and two musicians playing. It was all period, and Susan Strasberg and Dolores Dorn were it was just extraordinary, and they had me do it again in a color film, because it won an award at AFI. And it just, the possibilities were so extraordinary, and what you could create just by, this was a short play. It was like 4 pages, and you could make it into this extraordinary experience. And in the middle of that, my friend Mary Beth Yarrow, who came from Minnesota, said that in Wilmer, in her small town, these 8 women were going on strike against a bank in Minnesota because they had been told to train these boys, and then the boys were made into their bosses. And these were women who, were anywhere from 20 to 60, and there were 8 of them. And she was married to Peter Yarrow at the time. And so he gave us money to go and make a documentary about these 8 women who went on strike. So cold that when I had a mic in Wilmer, Minnesota, and I'd go to ask a question of somebody in the street, what do you think of the women? It was so cold I couldn't move my mouth. And they were marching in that weather, 8 hours a day, 8 women. I mean, they were heroes to me. And that just broke open a whole way of thinking. And of course, I didn't know if the documentary would go anyplace. It was my little documentary. And so I went to, I think it was CBS or
CBS, yeah.
It was CBS, and they said no, that I couldn't make it into a film. And then one of the women there said, call the boss. And I can't remember his name. It was Carol, the great Carol, great comic comedian.
Carol O'Connor.
Carol.
No, actor.
Actress.
Burnett.
Oh, Carol Burnett.
Carol Burnett. It was her husband. Who was
Yes, of NBC.
what?
Grant Tinker.
Grant Tinker. It was Grant Tinker. And
That was Mary Tyler Moore, that's right.
who was Carol? Was it Grant Tinker?
Mary Tyler Moore.
It was Grant Tinker's
Oh, okay.
wife, yes.
I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Anyway, I called him and I described it, and he gave me the go-ahead. So I could get the story of these 8 women that was buried in Wilmer, Minnesota, out to millions, because at that time, I mean, there was only ABC, CBS, and NBC. I mean, you didn't have all the stations, so that millions would see the stories of these women. And that's what started me. I did the same thing with Down and Out in America, where we had a script written, and Christine Lottie and Jeff Daniels played so that everybody would know what these problems were. And that's really how it started with Marlo's movie too, and seeing this young woman who had gone through that kind of distress and have Marlo bring her to the world, you know.
What's extraordinary about this period to me is that you're working on both sides of that divide, documentary and fiction, and one of them is feeding the other one constantly.
Yes.
Constantly, and it would be the equivalent if you were a writer and you would go out and you would report a story as a journalist and you would turn around and write a novel about it.
Yes.
There's the translation of that is fascinating because there aren't a whole lot of directors who do that on the regular, and the ones who do, we notice it. Like the late Jonathan Demme was one of those people.
Yes.
And there are examples of people who directed a film once as a documentary and then did it again as a feature film. Werner Herzog is one of those people, and there are others. But you did it multiple times. And if you go and see them, and a lot of these are on YouTube, I have to say, sometimes in their entirety and sometimes in pieces, but they're worth looking at because you can see that back and forth. You can see that the reporting, I guess you would say, that you're doing, and it's really informing when you turn around and make a drama out of it. And Marlo, the work that Marlo did, you were talking about her work as an actress. That's the same kind of thing that she was doing in researching the part. It's just
Yes.
amazing.
Yes. Well, she was amazing. She was amazing. Well, you know, you showed that little YouTube thing that I did of Hillary.
Yeah.
And, you know, making a documentary is huge. I mean, it's huge. Down and out in America, there's one that was never released because of a suit against us because of this horrible situation in Texas, which I do want to have shown sometime. But the thing on Hillary, I felt so helpless because documentaries, to make a documentary, it takes years and years and years and years and years. You have to put it together, and it had happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
She had lost. And not just that she had lost, but she had lost to the last person in the world that you wanted, you know. And so I am not knowledgeable in any form but film. I'm not. I don't have that brain. I don't know arithmetic. I don't. As my first cameraman said to me, well, Lee, it's simple trigonometry. and that's what it is. It's trigonometry. I don't know it. But I have a cohort, a co-producer, Roberta, and her son, Taylor Purdy. And Roberta set it up so that Taylor and I could work and that I could give a structure to his getting the pieces together. I did a documentary called Battered, which is an amazing documentary. It was done in the center of the country. I saw this woman being battered, Hillary being battered. It was never said. I mean, she was criticized. It was this. He was, disgusting. But the element of battery was never picked up. How could he say that? How could he do that? How could, there's a piece in the thing where she is in front of the committee for 11 hours, the committee, the Benghazi committee, for 11 hours. And they gave her, every hour, they gave her a time to go to the bathroom. And then they go to Trump, who is talking to these, hundreds of thousands of people. Where did she go? He says, and all the people, the bathroom. And he says, I know, I don't want to talk about it, it's disgusting. Well, why isn't MSNBC pointing that out?
Because they're all getting money from the ratings that they get from covering Trump.
I
I mean, let's call it what it is. That's what it's about. And see, I mean, you see this. And CNN is probably the most disappointing of all because they've turned their airwaves over to Trump.
Yeah, it's, you know,
I didn't think
it
CNN
sells, you know, it sells. But anyways, so, you know, I think that the main thing that you say to yourself is, it's not fair. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
It's when you say to yourself, it's not fair. It's like, you know, the guy who yelled out in that Patty Chayefsky film, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it. Mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Well, the way that we can work with that is you're mad as hell and I can do something. You know, I can make a little film about it.
Yeah.
And so all the other people who were mad as hell and yelling it out their windows, take a breath because you say, I'm not alone. You know, I'm not alone in feeling like this. Everybody else out there.
That was part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you was because I get a sense when looking at your work as a director, there is an animating spark of anger at unfairness in almost everything that I've seen you do, and the TV movies and the documentaries. And seriously, there should be just a Lee Grant Film Festival so we can put two of these side by side and study them. How do you feel right now about the state of the country then?
Oh, please.
Really? Is there hope?
No.
Are we how far down are we? I mean,
If we can get an Obama, then we can recover. Nobody thought that a brilliant black man could be our president for 2 terms. Nobody thought it. And if Comey hadn't come out and questioned Hillary's emails, she would have been president. The kind of ugly blips and mistakes that permeated our lives in this whole last year have led us to a place that I think we will recover from. I think everybody is so repulsed.
Not everybody.
Am I right?
yeah.
That I think we're all, you know, pulling together to get rid of this Humpty Dumpty and let him fall. And we will rise again. We will.
Wow.
I think so.
Thank you for your anger, for your righteousness, and thank you for your art.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
Woo!
art. Lee Grant.
Woo, 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 woo. Woo!
Thank you.
It's my new best friend.
Yeah. Woo!